Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Faith Walk Frontier. All power, honor, glory, and praise to the Lord God Jesus Christ. I'm Jared, and in this episode, I'm going to be speaking about my adoption. I thought it would be fun to do this video today because on this day, September 23rd, in the 80s, I was born in Santiago, Chile. And I was also adopted at infancy pretty much right after I was born. I totally forgot about this, and my mom sent over a snippet from a newspaper article about my adoption on September 23rd. Just says, former Detroiters Richard and Betty, my dad and my mom, of Boston, Massachusetts, joyfully announced the arrival of their son, Jared Zachary, born in Santiago, Chile. This is also a photo I thought was pretty cool. This is from a photo album from the 80s about my adoption and the airline and the plane that my parents had took picking me up. A lot of all of this is still a mystery. There's not much information out there about my birth as far as my biological family is concerned. I have no recollection of things. I was an infant, obviously, and my biological parents are unknown and other family members and stuff like that. But I find it all very interesting, especially, looking back at it now and examining what was going on. But I did get my DNA checked, and the results are a little bit surprising to me, at least. I should be on a Ancestry DNA commercial or something like that, because it's a little bit weird. My biological mother's side is native to Chile, native to South America. On my biological father's side, I am Italian, Greek, Spanish, or Iberian Peninsula, and British. So my biological father's side of things is made up of European nations, essentially. Whereas my mother's side is native to South America. It just means that my biological dad must have come down to Chile from over in Europe at some point and met my biological mom a long time ago. This is a Jewish family that I was adopted into. Really, really good people, God-fearing people, not extremely religious Judaism, but definitely I was going to religious school, having to learn Hebrew, studying the Torah or the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament, essentially, studying those things. Having to be, bar mitzvahed, and that was a part of my family's tradition. So I grew up spending my childhood and adolescent years in a Jewish household. And that is just a unique part of my journey to Christ. I'm going to tell you a story about my childhood, because in the last video, when I mentioned that I started off in the darkness, I meant it. Even as a child, I was learning and practicing how to lie, cheat, and steal to manipulate people around me, including my own family and parents. So I was pretty troubled as a child, and that had nothing to do with my environment. I was raised in a really good home. I was raised with probably the best parents that I could have ever asked for. Some of the best schools. And that wasn't my choice. I was adopted into this family, and it happened to turn out to be a really good family, which had nothing to do with the wickedness, the evil that was inside of me. Because even in that environment, in that positive environment, there were no influences for me to establish my ways of lying and cheating and stealing as a child. It was already in me to do that. It was already there, as if, I was more aligned with the enemy and the will of the enemy for my life. So I started as a child of darkness, meaning that it didn't take any external forces for me to lie, manipulate, cheat, and steal from school, friends, parents. Later on, it would be employers. I've got a lot of stories. We're going to unpack a lot of it. Not today, but we're going to get there. The story I want to tell from my childhood is one that'll paint a picture to tell you as an audience where I was at between the ages of 5 to 10 years old. So my best friend at the time, one of my best friends and closest friends as a child, his name is John. We'll say John C. God rest his soul. He's passed away. And I think it's been over 10 years now since he died. John and I were like brothers. We did a lot together. And our favorite things to do were some of the most mischievous things that a 7 or 8-year-old could be up to. And I'll give you an example. We would consistently lie to our parents. This is during the time when kids could go out to the park and leave their house and leave a note on the counter as to where they're going and come back at a particular time. This is before how things are today. Let's just put it like that, to avoid getting into any sticky weeds with it. Things were different in the 90s. And if you were in suburban America during the 90s, chances are you had it pretty good. So when I would meet up with John, our whole plan was to lie to our parents and manipulate our authority figures around us as to what we were really up to. They thought we were just skateboarding at the park. But what John and I would do, 2 kids under 10 years old would lie to our parents, get together at the park with our skateboards, and then 2 kids making their way from the park through town, walking and taking the T or the train to downtown spots in metro areas as kids by ourselves without our parents, walking around this place, what was called Cleveland Circle. I think Cleveland Circle is still there. If you're from the East Coast, or if around the Boston area, you're probably familiar with Cleveland Circle. And during that time, they had movie theater there. That's where the pizza places were, the corner store, all of these different types of shops. But our favorite thing to do would be to lie to our parents and then sneak into rated R movies at the movie theater. Just because we could. Just simply because we could. Other than that, we would sneak into the corner store at Cleveland Circle, and at that time, I think it was Christie's and CVS, but at that time it was the corner store. It was literally called the corner store. And if you remember, in the 90s, the main pornographic magazines back then were Playboy and Penthouse, right? We're like 7 or 8 years old. We would go into the corner store, and there wasn't really any surveillance systems back then, maybe there was light surveillance. People started putting up cameras. But if you remember the 90s, these convenience stores, all they would really have is like this convex mirror posted up in the corner of the store. And the clerk at the front would just be able to, check out the mirror, keep an eye on things in the store. So what did John and I do? We go into the store, we can barely see over the counter. We make our way back to the back corner of the magazines section where the adult magazines were, because at that age, we were already exposed to this stuff. How? Older siblings of our friends mainly. But we would go into the store. I would check out the mirror while John would climb the magazine rack to the top where all the pornographic magazines were in the little plastic casing for the magazine, so that you had to struggle to get the magazine out, basically. And what we would do is one of us would stand guard and the other would climb the magazine rack up to the top and then yank like a bunch of magazines out, just like grab it by the plastic and yank the magazines off the top shelf. And then they would, tumble down and splatter. John and I would take these magazines and stuff them in our pants, in our shorts, whatever we were wearing, and pull our shirts over it. And then just as calmly as we walked in, just walk out the store with stolen pornographic magazines in our pants at 7 or 8 years old. I will say this, when it comes to being adopted, as a child, I did reach a point, I would say, in the midst of my rebelliousness as a child, I reached a point where I knew that my parents weren't really my parents. And that kind of concept at as young of an age that came into my mind, looking back at it, it's a little bit of a scary thing, because as mischievous and as in the dark that I was, I also was given an awareness that my parents weren't really my parents, and that because of that, I could do whatever I wanted. That kind of thinking was in me and led to a lot of rebelliousness, because I felt like there wasn't really any true authority over me. I think that there are effects of the adoption in me, and that those effects took on a role in my personality early on, before understanding, respecting, or knowing about God in my life. Thanks again for tuning into Faith Walk Frontier. Really appreciate your support and your views. If you enjoy this type of content, please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Again, it's Faith Walk Frontier. I'm Jared, and I love you all.